Hello, my name is Patricia Victime, and I will be discussing my reactions and thoughts to designing for the audience and engagement. Overall, we'll be discussing understanding the relationship between technology, content, and pedagogy. My name is Patricia Victime. I grew up in Long Island, and I currently live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm in my final semester of the Mallet program, looking towards a professional certification and certification in instructional technology. I have been teaching in New York City for the past 5 years. I have had many pros and cons, but overall, I love it. I'm very passionate about education and culture. So thinking about the context of my students, I have been working in a school that is predominantly Caucasian and Latin American and Asian. I used to work in East Flatbush where it was predominantly Caribbean and African American descent demographic. And over time, I have seen disparities and both sides of the coin, so to speak. And last year was the first year that I was working in a middle school, sixth grade, and I was teaching social studies. And unfortunately, we transitioned into remote learning. So thinking about how my students were affected during that time and just reviewing and reflecting over the activities and feedback that they gave us, this is just an example of how appreciative the students were for us just showing up every day and letting them know that we are all in this together and we are trying their best as teachers to learn as we go so that we give them the best that we can give during a difficult time. So that was an interesting experience. After reading the passages, I started thinking about three main concepts that stuck out to me, and one of them was backward design. I realized that working in the school that I'm in currently, they were not familiarized, but they were transitioning into using backward design. And I found that surprising because the school I came from was a charter school, and they were driving backward design for teachers to use. And I agree that backwards design is something that can benefit both teachers and students in an efficient way. We're learning. So I was thinking about authenticity and inquiry and the thought that raising questions can present itself to finding information and facts that'll answer our questions, and we should encourage our students to think like that. It is the instructor's responsibility to challenge themselves, to inquire, and find what technologies exist for the benefit of student learning. It is up to us, I believe, to go out and find what's out there to evolve the context and the tools that we're using to benefit our students overall and ourselves. Instructors also have the ability to create online environments that address, study, and consider solutions to address the challenges faced in field environments. Technology allows for both synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities and also removes physical barriers that exist in a typical learning environment. Instructors can always challenge the prior knowledge of any learner in order to establish new connections with new information. So when using a backwards design, they should ask themselves specific questions when planning, clarifying their learning outcomes, objectives, and behavioral goals. That way they can ensure that students are being taught the necessary skills to support student learning in each content area. So if we as teachers are asking ourselves the right questions and what do we ultimately want students to know, then we can start to plan around the appropriate activities necessary to accomplish our learning goals. And in the remote learning setting, I have noticed that learning how to access and utilize technology and the tools we present to our students is equally as important as procedures and routines we would use in the classroom. So talking more about the remote learning environment is something else that So when thinking about the remote learning environment, I agree that it's important for instructors to value the elements of learning management systems. I think it's necessary for the remote learning environment to be a space where students can communicate effectively about the content they're learning while using technology tools and learning how to use these tools. Uh, and that way, it's very important for instructors to also understand the relationship between the technology they're using and the content and pedagogy when they are integrating this technology into their curriculum and education. So technologies can substantially reduce the restrictions created by travel and time. We can now pop into a Google Meet in our laptops or on our phones virtually rather than rushing to make it to a meeting and be there physically or cover a class and worry about supervision. It's very interesting to me how our needs are evolving and changing. So these tools are great to also use to allow students to hand in assignments, use audio, visual, video, any mixed media format that can express the content you're trying to teach and expose the skill that students are learning. So here's some examples of some of the learning management systems I've been using. I have been using mainly Google, and I believe that that's the most engaging and synchronized way for my students to access the learning platforms I present to them. So anything that I'm assigning to my students, I can plug it right into Google Classroom and it links right into their email. They can see their grades. They can see all of the grades to their assignments. It can be turned in, it can be returned. They can receive immediate feedback, which I love. And I find that is the best way for me to get the most engagement out of my students, especially for those students who in the classroom might not have had the chance to ask for help or receive the help that they need. It's interesting to me how now in remote learning, we have somewhat of freedom to access the tools that we need to help our students through the use of technology. And this creates an overall, so thinking about the remote learning community overall, the biggest thing that stuck out to me was the discussion of engagement, and that when developing a learning environment community, it is essential for instructors to provide opportunities where learners can develop relationships and connections between themselves and the content, as well as their peers and instructors that make up the learning environment. It's important for instructors to set expectations at the start of the course that will give students the opportunity to plan and prepare mentally and physically to work in collaborative ways to complete some assignments throughout the course. Students should ultimately feel empowered and encouraged to solve problems in their field. They should feel like problem solvers and share ideas, simulate potential global professional environments that they would participate in the future. So, working together and receiving feedback, giving feedback, accountable talk, advocating for your needs, noticing misconceptions and mistakes and data points, all types of things that we are now teaching our students in a digital format to prepare them for the work field of the future. And ultimately, students can be presented with problems that they work together to solve. So this is just an example of some of the formats that I have been thinking of and practicing engaging with my students. I've been using Google Classroom and making virtual websites for students to access and contact me in ways that they might not have known before. It's also a great way for me to upload materials that they may need throughout the course of the semester. And I think this is just another way for staff members to work together and collaborate and teach each other things that they may know, things that they are learning when it comes to using technology in the classroom, whether synchronous or asynchronous, but specifically in this situation, we would be talking about a remote learning model where we are coming together online and assigning materials and documents and videos and mixed media for students to learn and gain information and from.